So, hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Druid High Performance Podcast. Welcome. This episode is about focus, and we'll be using the term focus, but concentration and attention are all interchangeable terms related to focus. So, if I use any of the other words, I'm meaning the same thing. Focused attention could be a combination of those two. So previously we've looked at health and longevity. We looked at mobility, posture, and the breath, and how those contribute to a healthy life and a long life, and focused on longevity, as I say. And that's one key pillar of what we do here at Druid High Performance. Now we're moving on to a different pillar, if you like, and that's on the performance side of things. And we are looking at today, as I say, focus. So now we're going to move on to more of the psychological aspects, the psychological development, whereas before it was about health development. Now these are interchangeable in the sense that the breath, if we're breathing at a slow pace, we increase our focus, as was mentioned in the previous podcast. So there's a bit of bleed through or overlap on these topics. But today we're specifically looking now to move on to the performance side of things. And as I say, today we're looking at focus and how critical that is to focus, to performance, sorry. And if we're not able to focus on the right things at the right time, of course, we're not going to be able to perform at our best. And that's in the office, at home, in any activity we take part in. So without further ado, we'll start on today's podcast. So Druid High Performance Podcast is a self-development, is a podcast related to self-development for body, mind, interested in focus, performance, longevity, and empowerment in the modern world we find ourselves. Please like and subscribe and share this podcast with anyone who might find it useful. So we're really going to talk briefly now about the modern world's effect on focus and what's changed in the last few years and how it's affecting our focus as a society, really. So in my view, the effect of the modern world on focus is quite impossible to calculate. Everything is speeding up. We now have the capacity to be everywhere at once. We have access to more information than anyone in history. We should be moving forward and doing great things with this technology of ours, but we seem to be kind of beholden to this technology. Alone, it's been noted by a few different researchers that the IQ average across society is actually reducing by decade, a point or two, when we're we have so much information at our fingertips that you would have thought this would be the opposite. But it seems like people are getting lazier. They are becoming less focused. They are becoming more impulsive, and as a consequence, people are looking for more and more immediate gratification as opposed to long-term planning. So today we're not really used for waiting for things anymore. Everything is immediate and our attention spans are shortening as a result. It wasn't that long ago where not everyone had a computer, not everyone had access to the internet, where now pretty much everyone has access to it on their phone, and it's Aladdin's cave. There is endless things to spend our time looking at, reading, listening to, watching, and it's very hard to shake this thing off. It carries around a great weight and burden on our mind and attention because there's so many things we can do with it. And as was highlighted previously on previous podcast, the design of social media and a lot of the websites that we use today is similar to how casinos are run. They hijack what's called the incentive reward system. It's like we're a mouse and they're dropping crumbs and leading us in a certain direction. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced, but sometimes you're online and you feel like you're being almost kind of pulled along, controlled, You're looking for the next thing to watch, looking for the next thing to read. It's not like you're consciously thinking about selecting something to look and read or listen to or watch. You're just kind of getting dragged along, and it's because they've designed these systems so effectively that we really find it difficult to resist. So our focus and attention is actually being dragged along. Um, we are not able to focus what we want to do and then act so much as we are kind of dragged along, as I say, like a mouse or a rat in a box. Behavioral psychology discovered many years ago that if you put a rat or a pigeon in a box and give them rewards for tapping on a button, they will tap that button over and over and over again. And it seems like now the modern world's a bit of a Skinner box, which is the name of the researcher who developed this, and he managed to do all sorts of interesting things, teaching rats and pigeons to do all sorts of things. But we'll leave it at that. That we have more distractions around us now than ever before in history, and it's not so beneficial to us. If it was, we'd be getting smarter. Would be improving in so many different ways. But there's a lot of pathology related to this modern world and the social media and so on and so forth. So, last podcast we were looking at the breath, and we talked about the idea of the horse and the monkey from Qigong, and this relates to focus as well. Now, the horse, this is when we're in a calm state, when we are not distracted by anything, and our mind is focused, and we're able to think before we act. Whereas the monkey is impulsive. The monkey is, what's that over there? What's that shiny thing over there? What's that toy over there I can play with? And bouncing around all over the place. And so this analogy of the horse and monkey is useful to for us to understand the difference between these two sort of schemas in our mind, if you like. Now, these are not just psychological, they are biological as well. So when we're breathing at a slow rate, we're using that parasympathetic nervous system we mentioned before in the last podcast. That's when we're at rest. Our body is not, our mind is not distracted by anything. We are able to rest and recuperate for future action. And in that state, we're able to heal the body. We're able to look at these long-term effects that we need to take care of. Whereas if we have to deal with immediate effects, which is in the monkey phase, the impulsive phase, we never get that chance. And that's sort of how I feel when I get dragged along on YouTube or whatever I'm looking at. It's not so much as it used to be, but I used to find myself just clicking one of those videos on the side. Check this new flashy video on this, that, and the other, this interesting looking thing. And an hour would go by, and I'd reflect on what I've looked at and listened to, and it wouldn't be that useful, but it's a really effective way to drag you along. So one thing we're going to talk about a little bit today is time preference. Now, time preference is a theory, or a theory will do as a term. It looks at the differences in how people look to get rewards from things. Probably not explaining this that well. So time preference, when it's low, is that old adage where there was an old saying that you would sow the seeds for your future generations to have shade from the sun. So you would plant seeds for trees to grow, but you wouldn't yourself benefit from those trees. Your grandchildren would. So that's long-term planning. That's low time preference. My preference is for low time preference, meaning that I will plan for the future, things that I will not reap the benefit of. Now, this for many years was standard. For thousands of years, that's how it was. Whereas now, we're very, very impulsive. As I say, social media and the society we live in today is immediate. We can order food which is all pre-prepared. We can all instead of doing pretty much anything, there's a product or service out there which allows us to do things immediately. Now, you could say that's very beneficial and it's brilliant, but the effect of that is quite worrying from my view. So high time preference is I need it now, I need it an hour ago, and I'm not willing to wait. And so it seems to me when you look at time preference, which is a term taken from economics, and apply it to us individually, the horse is low time preference. The horse is able to focus on something as this analogy plays out and then act. And the horse will spend their time thinking about things and then act. Whereas the monkey, high time preference, is just looking for the next dopamine hit. It's looking for that next product to buy, that new thing to consume, that new flashy video to watch. It's everything is speeded up. Now the problem is when you live in a world which is all about high time preference, you're unable to focus. You're not able to delay gratification to a later date. It's all immediate, and well, it's things take time to build, especially self-development, as we talk about on this podcast. But really, anything. It's easy to build a reputation up over time, and very quickly you can destroy that. So to build a good reputation takes low time preference. It means turning up week after week, month after month, and delivering. Whereas that can be crushed in one outburst, basically. So what I'm trying to say is, for the longest time, we were geared towards low time preference, but the last 20 years has really shattered that paradigm for us, and it's left us. And I spoke about this previously. For people of my age, I'm 42. We remember a time before the internet. We remember this low time preference world, whereas kids today, they never had to wait for to things to come out like we used to have to wait for. There used to be, remember, films used to come out and it would be a year before, 2 years before the DVD. I mean, I can't remember how long. Whereas now, it comes out so much quicker. You could like stream it down instantly. Over the COVID pandemic, cinemas were shut, so new film releases were immediate. You used to have to wait for things. Now it's a global release on the same day. All around the world, things come out at the same time. There isn't that sense of waiting anymore. Imagine back in the day for our grandparents. See, if one was traveling around the world, they would send a letter back to their loved ones. I mean, that is just unthinkable now. So, I mean, brilliant. We can contact people around the world and so on and so forth. But the effect on our mental capacity is being quite worrying from my point of view. And when you look at the literature on high performance, and you look at individuals who perform at a very, very high level, well, they're able to focus with incredible depth, and they're able to block out all distractions. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So it seems that focus is really integral to high performance, as is quoted by one of the main researchers in the area, which I'll quote for you guys a little bit later on. It really looks at everything. Focus taps into all these different elements of performance. But if focus is being blurred, if it's becoming more cloudy for people as time goes on, then it's going to become even more important. And that's really what we're talking about today. So that's a little bit of a touch on the horse and the monkey. We want to be geared towards the horse. We want to have a calm, constrained mind which is powerful and ready to go, not an impulsive mind that it's bouncing around from one topic to the next every few seconds, because we have this high-powered computational system, if you like, our brain. It works best when it's focused on a particular task with as much focus as possible, with as much processing power as possible. The more we divide that processing power up between different things, it's like a computer. If you've got 15 windows open, they're all doing different things, the computer slows down. It's the same with us. So dual tasking is sort of like multitasking. They've done research and looking at asking people to do two things at once, maybe couple things at once, three things at once, and then they used different tools and different methods to track performance on these. So there was one study I found interesting, which was dual tasking research using eye tracking tools, and that compared people in a driving simulator. And so what they did was they put their eye tracking tools on people, and then they just observed them driving and looking at how often they looked at the dashboard, how often they looked out the front of the car, how long they looked at the mirrors. And what they found was there was a pretty broad use of attention looking at all these specific elements. But then they had three different conditions. So the ordinary driving had the most broad use of attention. The more looking at, mirrors, looking at the road, dashboard. So they were looking where they were supposed to be looking. Then they had a live conversation as one condition, and they had a phone conversation. And the live conversation, they found the attention was narrowed a bit, whereas the phone conversation, it was narrowed even more. And basically we have, as I say, we have limited computational power in our brain. And the more tasks we give ourselves, this is on hands-free as well. So if you've got someone sitting next to you, you're getting a lot of information which you're not getting from the phone conversation. So what the theory was, the live conversation wasn't quite as narrowing for the attention as the phone conversation, because you're picking up out of the corner of your eye, you're picking up more information from that conversation. So you might say, oh, I'm driving, I've got my hands free on, what's the problem? The problem is, if you're having a conversation which is requiring you to use abstract thought, you're trying to picture something here, someone's talking to you about, what are we having for dinner? Oh, well, what do I want for dinner? And then you kind of up in your own mind thinking about what you like to eat tonight, what we're going to do tomorrow, so on and so forth. Well, your brain has had to make calculations. And that calculation is, can't look at the mirrors as much, can't look out the front windows as much, can't look at the dashboard as much. So basically our attention gets fixed in front in a more narrow and narrow field. And I'm not a driver, but people are driving for many years. They'll be saying, oh, I can do that, I can handle this. But the research is pretty clear. We are not able to put as much attention and focus to what we're doing as we'd like to, because multitasking is a myth. We basically have to divvy up our limited resources across these activities that we're doing. And human beings, like computers, like anything, work best when we have few distractions and we can put all of that attention to bear on one thing. Then we can do that one thing, we can move on to something else. And as I say, modern living is fracturing our attention and focus, and it's really inhibiting people for being at their best. You know how it is sometimes when you're at work or you're at home and you're checking your email, then you check Facebook, then you check Twitter, then you check LinkedIn, you check this and you check that, and like an hour's gone by and you've really done nothing. You've just been dragged along. Like I say, social media has been designed by people that have experience with casinos and fruit machines, and it's all those flashing lights, and there's no clocks in a casino. You're basically a rat in a maze, and you're being dragged along. And I've definitely felt that, and I'm sure most people listening have done too. So again, we need to be pushing ourselves back towards the horse, not the monkey. The monkey thinks it can dual task. It can do this, it can do that. But as I say, the research is pretty clear. That's not the case. Now, we tend to think that our perception is pretty global. We can see everything, we can hear everything around us. We have a really good sense of what's going on around us, but that's not the case. There was a study done in 1999 by Simons and Chabrice, where they asked people to watch a video, and they basically gave people a task to count a basketball team passing the ball around each other. So there's two teams, one in black, one in white, and you had to count the team in black, I believe it was, and they're passing the ball between each other. And so you've got a task there and you watch. During the video, a lot of you might have heard of this one already, a man in a gorilla suit walks into the middle of the shot, beats his chest, and then walks out. Now, 80% around that sort of number didn't see the person in the gorilla's suit. So when they were asked after the video how many passes, most people got it right, 15 passes I believe it was, but 80% people didn't notice the gorilla. And they've done this research a few more times now and had people had the background change color and different sort of things. And what they found was um, when we are given a task, specific task to focus our attention, we will ignore all sorts of things because your brain is got a limited resource and it's always looking to cut down on what is unnecessary. And so when you have a focused task to perform, like count the passes, other things are irrelevant. And so you don't see it. We have this impression that we see so much, but really we're half blind. Our ears don't pick up as much sound, and we have focused attention with our ears. We could be focused on our name. If we hear someone say our name, we'll quickly pivot round and look over in our direction because we've heard that name since we were very, very young, and it's very powerful for us. So our hearing is very specific, and so is our vision. We feel like we hear everything and we see everything, but there is a hierarchy. There is our values actually dictate what we hear and what we see, because the world itself is chaos. There's so much information that we literally drown in that information if we had no hierarchy or value system. They've done research in psychedelics, and one thing that psychedelics does is sort of shatters the value system momentarily, and that's why people will stand and look at a tree when they've taken certain drugs, because ordinarily you just walk past a tree. We don't even pay attention to most things. If you look out the window or you look in the room you're in at the moment, there is literally a million things you could look at, but most of it you just is irrelevant. Your brain just goes, that's irrelevant. 90%, don't even bother with that. And so what this study showed with the counting bears in 1999 was that we have very limited sensory power. Now, this is how magicians distract us with their magic tricks, They distract us over here and then they pull a little trick, they pull a card or whatever they're doing, and then it appears like magic. And we're like, how did they do it? And the funny thing is, I'm aware of the distraction. I remember I was at a networking event a few years back, pre-COVID, and there was a magician there doing all these sorts of tricks. And in my mind, I was like, he's distracting everyone, but I'm going to pay close attention and he will not be able to trick me. And I'm there, he's like talking to me and I'm just like, listen, buddy, I'm not listening to what you've got to say. I've got my eyes on I'm seeing what I'm supposed to be looking at. I'm looking at whatever he's doing and I'm sure I can figure out what it is he's doing. And guess what? No chance. He had me, could not see what he was doing. And so even when you're conscious of the fact that you're being distracted, you will still be distracted. That's quite remarkable. It just shows you how easily our focus can be dragged around by someone who's skilled at what they do. And so what I'm really trying to get across in this opening section of the podcast is your sensory power is very, very limited. It feels like we can see and hear everything, but we cannot. And when we're stressed and when we're in a high arousal state, a high arousal state is when we're kind of, the stress is getting to us or maybe overly excited. This causes a narrowing of our focus. So our ability to focus is limited. We're not able to pick up signals from a couple of different things. We can get into tunnel vision. So we want to be focused, but if we're overly stressed, we can be focused entirely on one thing, and maybe it's not the most important thing. We've seen people in sport have they call it catastrophic performance, and sometimes they will get fouled or they'll get angry and they'll just be focused on an opponent doing something or something over here. They'll miss the important thing and then they'll end up losing, conceding a goal. They'll get distracted and knocked out, and then whatever it is, whatever sport you fancy, and we know ourselves, if you're stressed by a particular thing, there's an alarm going on outside, sorry about this guys, but stress and arousal causes a narrow focus, and it inhibits our ability to spread our focus on different things, because we sometimes need to selectively change where our focus lies. It could be that we're at work and we're doing a particular task, and then we have to move on to something else, and we have to switch our focus completely. Before it was we're doing written cognitive skills, or whatever. We're writing something a complex process, a study, a report, and from then on we have to give a speech, we have to give a talk, we have to do something completely different. So sometimes we have to switch our focus, and if we're stressed and we're too highly aroused, we are not able to do that so easily. So in the research related to sports and exercise psychology, they talk about focus is said to include the following 4 terms. So selective attention is what I was just talking about, the ability to select something to attend to and then move on to another topic. So we could be specifically doing something and then we need to move on. Now we can be focused internally on what we're doing or externally. So there's been research using putting in golf, where they asked participants to focus on, say, their shoulder movements, or their hands, or where the ball goes. So internal focus would be, okay, my hands or my arms, something to do specifically with my body, fine motor function, fine motor skills. Whereas external focus would be, that I'm going to track with my eye where I want the ball to go. What they found was external focus works best, and the more distal, the more further away from us, the better. So again, if I'm putting, I don't want to be thinking about my body. If I'm doing anything like free throw shooting or anything which is fine motor function, I can't think about my body because it's too, there's how much control have I got over my wrist? My wrist can go in a million different directions, and so can my hands and my fingers and so on. So if I'm thinking about my hand control and what that's doing, there's so much variability there that it's really just going to make me fall over with my performance. And I've had experience with that playing football in front of the school once. I was so focused on what I was doing, I couldn't even kick a ball in a straight line. And I was literally useless because I was thinking about the wrong things. So when I'm putting, when I'm shooting free throws, I must have external focus. I must focus on the trajectory of the ball. Must sort of ignore myself and think about the outcome. The external focus will allow me to kind of put that in the right direction. So as I say, you've got distal, external, which is better in this study they showed on putting than proximal. So proximal will be close to me, external, and distal will be further away from me. So as I say, the ball traveling to the hole, not where I'm hitting the ball because it's so close to me. And half a millimeter on how I strike the ball when I'm putting is going to make a massive difference in the distal, the more distant effect. So I want to think about the furthest away from me. So if I'm hitting a tennis ball or I'm throwing something, I don't want to think about my hand or wrist or how the ball travels away from my hand close to me. I want to look at it distance. So when you're throwing something to someone, you're looking at that person, you're kind of aiming at their chest, where's a good height for them to catch to, and you focus on that, and basically you forget what you're doing and your body puts it there because all these complex functions are happening and they work unconsciously. There's no good thinking about these because once we start getting conscious about these sorts of things, it tends to be that our performance literally falls off a cliff. So automaticity is one of my favorite words because it's a fun word to say. Automaticity. So that is unconscious thought processing. So automaticity, which is fun, as I say, it's fun to say because it's a bit of a tongue twister. But automaticity exists in the sense that sometimes information comes into us and we process it and act all without conscious thought. So if you think about an elite sportsman or woman or a musician, this is happening all the time. They can't put conscious thought on every little thing that's happening to them. So this is all happening below conscious awareness. Now what they found was the more focused you're on the external, so attentional focus on the external, where research supports that this is better for balance, it's better for accuracy, it's better for speed, so it's better for maximal force and endurance. So for example, if someone is lifting up a big weight, they're trying to break the world record for deadlifts and they're thinking about specifically their internal focus, no good. It's no good because you're going to inhibit. There's so many things which you're going to be conscious of that you don't want to be conscious of. We want them to be external. So external factors could be things like we don't want to be thinking specifically about something within the body. Like I remember my brother taught me a teaching point for doing pull-ups years ago, and it's like, imagine you've got like a grapefruit between your shoulder blades and you're squeezing and you're kind of crushing the juice. So that is external because the grapefruit or the pineapple or whatever will be outside of my body. So it's actually forcing my upper back to be active and to work. Whereas if I'm thinking too much about the body, how the shoulders are working within the body, then it's too much fine detail, and then I'm not kind of harnessing the automaticity of complex motor skills. So when we're doing an activity, it could be training of physical training, it could be something related to work, it could be anything. We want to kind of harness this ability to focus on the external and let most of our processing be underconscious, so unconscious, not under conscious control, because how many things can we really focus on at one time? As we said with the dual tasking previously, if we give ourselves too much, we narrow our focus and our performance goes to hell. So we must focus on something external. And again, the more distance from us, the better. So selective attention is one of the 4 key elements of focus or attention. That's switching between what we need to attend to. Maintaining attentional focus is sort of like focus endurance. It might be that we have to be particularly focused on something for a particular amount of time, and it's this that goes back to that horse analogy. The horse can happily sit there and eat grass and just be constrained, and it can just be focused on one thing and one thing at a time for long distances or long amounts of time. Now you'll find that high performers have got great endurance at this. The amateur ranks, the people coming up through, they're not able to keep this focus attention for long periods because it can take a lot of resources. It takes a lot of practice, especially when we get a bit fatigued. I was reading that certain athletes will practice this sort of attention training when they're already tired, because they know when they get into a match, like a tennis match, for example, once you get into the 3rd or 4th hour and you're exhausted and your attention goes all over the place, that's when your performance is going to dip. So when they're training on the court, they would get into a certain fatigue state, and then they would practice focused attention on certain elements, preparing themselves for these. Because we all have the capacity to remain focused for a certain amount of time, but high performance people, be that in sport, business, or whatever, a world-class researcher will be able to research at a level which an amateur researcher is not able to, because it takes a lot of resources. An author, I think it was Enid Blyton, would go out and she would write a certain amount of words a day, and she was incredibly focused on that. And it take a lot of endurance. Well, that was her focus. I'm doing however many, 5,000 words a day, and that's it. No distractions, and that's what I'm doing. Now, when you're writing your research proposal or whatever, sometimes you want to do anything but that. But it takes that focused attention to maintain that over time, and that's why she was able to write so many books. If you look at some of these authors are, chucking out books every year, the amount of focus that they have to take and their routines that allow them to do that is going to be building up this attentional focus over time. And again, if you had a look at an academic from 100 years ago, they would have never used a computer. They would have never had the distraction of the internet. So their attentional focus would just be beyond what we're able to do now, because they've never even seen a TV. They've never had a lot of the distractions that we have now. They've always had to do things by themselves. They haven't had the benefit of some of our modern appliances. And we could say we benefit, but in other words, they have a great benefit. Their mental focus is beyond pretty much what we're capable of nowadays, unless someone is basically, an Amish type person who just rejects. But I remember reading about Nietzsche he would go hiking for 14 hours, before he'd sit down and write. Charles Darwin used to go for long walks before he'd do any work as well. Like go for a 5 mile walk. Nietzsche would go for even longer, massive long hikes through Switzerland and Germany. And when he came back to write, he'd kind of mold these ideas over in the back of his mind, and then these ideas would just possess him, and he would just be able to go and go and go. Now, are we able to do this nowadays? That's a different question. But so moving on to the next. So we've got 4 key elements to focus as sports psychology identifies. Selective attention we talked about. Maintaining attentional focus we've also spoke about. Situational awareness. So what's going on around me? Has the situation changed? Now, someone impulsive chap on their motorbike going by. Wait for them to drop out. So situational awareness. Obviously, this is in a sporting context is used, but also in modern life, we're constantly in using situational awareness. Not when we're looking at our phone, not looking when we're going riding a bike, texting. I see all sorts of things. So how much focus can people who are doing these sorts of things put towards their situational awareness? Well, 0, pretty much. Whereas your high performance person, they are constantly aware of what's going on. And it goes back to this thing, you think about someone 500 years ago, they would have a sort of situational awareness when they're out in the country. They'd know instinctively where north, south, east, and west is. They know which direction the wind's blowing. They'd have all these keys, these cues that modern people, we don't really need. We could say we're reliant on technology, but it feels like we've lost something. So you take that to the nth degree. I remember hearing about Frederick the Great of Prussia, and he was a remarkable person. When it came to battle, the Prussian army was unmatched, and he was not only the king, not only was he a scholar, an artist, and a musician, and so on and so forth, but he was also a battle commander par excellence. So imagine you're stuck in the field, battle is raging around you, and the situational awareness required to basically muster a force and be constantly reacting to your opponents and so on. And that he was supposed to be amazing at that. He's literally engineering order out of chaos itself with musket fire all around him. Now, obviously, we're not a Prussian king organizing forces in the middle of open warfare, but this situational awareness is key. It's so far from many people's point of view, they wouldn't even think about it. They walk down the street, they don't even look where they're going. They're not even aware of what's around them. I see it every day, and it's quite shocking for me. But I'm nosy, and I pay attention to kind of what people are doing around me, and I urge you guys to do the same, because it will keep you safe. Because who knows what's around us? But that focus on what's around us. Have things changed? Because things are always changing, and you take the analogy to football. They always talk about the great central midfielders. They got eyes in the back of their head. Your Pirlos, your Paul Scholeses, your Xavi, your Iniesta. Well, their situational awareness is off the charts. They have time on the ball. In different sports, they have different analogies. In boxing, they might say they see everything. They see everything that their opponent's trying to do, and so on and so forth. Now, you might say how this applies to us. We live in a modern city. Well, things happen in modern cities which require situational awareness. I see people crossing the road without looking, people riding their bike, looking at their phone. A couple of New Years ago, me and my wife were on a way to visit friends of ours, and there was basically an accident been happening on New Year's Eve, just before we had come across that road. And we went into a shop and bought a few things as we were going on. It turned out some young girl, not looking where she's going, got knocked over, lost her leg. They were like literally putting sand on the road because of all of the blood and stuff. So don't think that, oh, I don't need to pay attention to what's around me. It's like we do. We absolutely do, because it might well happen one day when something happens around you and you best be aware of it, not to kind of make it too serious, this podcast, but that's something that I will instill in my daughter, and I advocate to all of my students and clients, because modern people think we're past all that. We don't need to pay attention to this, that, and the other. But yes, we do. Absolutely, we do. Shifting attention is required is the fourth thing, the fourth element of focus. Something might happen and we might have to switch our focus. It might be broad, it might be narrow, it might be internal, it might be external. It might be that something happens and the whole paradigm, the whole experience that we're having can shift. Now, a few years ago, in the last few years, or 3 or 4 years now, London have experienced a few terrorist attacks, and I've been in close proximity to 2 of them. Now, one of them, I was in Bank, and I might have mentioned this previously on another podcast, but me and my wife were in Bank. We're approaching London Bridge Station, and we get there, and there is just police everywhere. And so my attention, my situational awareness already kicked off, but I needed to shift. We found out what was going on. There was people stabbing people north of the river, south of the river. We were north. And we had to shift our attention as required. How do we get home? How do we get out of here to a safe location? And so very quickly, that's all that mattered. Nothing else mattered, and we walked down to Tower Hill and we got home. But once that thing triggered, everything else was irrelevant. So my attention shifted as required. And I'm guessing people which are listening to this have had experience where you're going along, life's normal, you're doing something or whatever, and then something happens and that changes. So you have to shift attention, and you have to move, and you have to take action now. No messing around. And they talk about different forms of focus, as I say, broad external focus from ourselves, and then we narrow into the narrow external focus, and then we have the internal focus, both narrow, so that could be more about our mood, how we're feeling broadly, and then the more narrow focus could be specific to a particular body part or something. So obviously, when it comes to performance, internal focus, when it's narrow, is not so good, but we might have an injury or something, we might have to be very cognizant of a specific part of the body. So we have the broad external focus, the narrow external focus. So we could be looking at a whole crowd of people. That's pretty broad. And then we could look at someone individual. And then we could be thinking about our mood or how we're feeling overall. And then we could go, okay, so how's your ankle feeling? That's very specific. So narrow internal focus. So this is just concepts to get used to. With sports psychology and psychology in general, they have gone deep into everything. And today is an introduction into topic of focus and why it's so important. So these are just a couple of ideas. I guess those are the 4 key aspects of focus to bear in mind. Now, when they're talking about attentional focus, they're talking about 3 processes too. So the selectivity of attention, what are we selecting? What are we paying attention to? Number 2 is the capacity. What is our attentional capacity? Because individual differences suggest that human beings are different in millions of ways, We have different capacity for different things. Some people have the capacity for unbelievable attention, and it can be pathological. It's people on the autism spectrum become unbelievably focused on things to their detriment. They have unbelievable capacity. They could become also very, very obsessed with things, which can be detrimental, but also genius type musicians and artists and so on and so forth. They would never have had the results they had if they didn't have that focus. So you could say that people have certain capacity for attention. They've got an unbelievably high IQ. They might not have had the most positive lives in their relationships and so on. They might have, had like Nietzsche didn't have a particularly long life. He got very, very sick. Some of the greatest artists ever, they were, they were quite neurotic and so on, but they were able to use their great talents, skills, and attention to invent new things, produce great works of art, and so on and so forth. So there is a cost to these sorts of things when you have unbelievable levels of these. But so the three processes for attentional focus: selectivity, capacity, which we're all different, and attentional alertness. And so arousal taps into this idea as well. So arousal has an effect on peripheral task alertness. So if we're very, very highly aroused, as I said before, we will lose our ability to focus on more than one thing. If you've blown a gasket, you're seeing red. As I said before, with certain sportsmen there or sportswomen, they, yourself, if you're furious, your temper's been rolled, you're not focusing on other details. Sometimes you're just focusing on what has annoyed you, and you get that tunnel vision. And tunnel vision is focus, but it's almost pathological focus. Maybe pathological is not the word. It's overly focused, and you're overly emotional, so you're not able to act as needs to be. You're not working to your best because you're overly aroused. It goes back to what we said in the breathing podcast. It's like Goldilocks, the classic. If you're over aroused, you're tunnel vision, you're furious, you're burning up resources, you can exhaust yourself. If you're under aroused, you're too late, you're lazy, you're kind of tired, you're not really into it, you're not really focused. We're looking for that Goldilocks zone. Now, some people operate at their best when they're absolutely bouncing off the walls. When certain fighters come out to fight, or tennis players come out to play tennis, they're jumping up and down. Rafa Nadal's the classic example. He's a high energy guy. He needs to have his heart pumping to be in his best. Whereas Roger Federer, he's coming out, he's swanning around, he's adjusting his hair. And you'll see this. You have people with this high arousal zone of optimum performance, and then there's these people with the low, and then you've got the people in the middle. Now, it's important to know where you stand. When you think back to yourself, when you've performed at your absolute best, when you've been absolutely focused, and you've been really, ticking on at quite that level, where you've been at your absolute best, describe it to yourself what that was. Because the more you know about yourself, the better. It could be that you're like Nadal, it could be you're like Roger Federer, or you're somewhere in the middle. And it could be task specific as well. You could do certain tasks where you need to be calm, cool, and collected. Maybe you really like to draw, but when you're drawing, you like to be super relaxed. But when you're playing football or you're rocking out on guitar, you like to have your heart pumping, because it's not so basic as one size fits all. Task specific too. There's always more layers to this. So we've looked at the 4 different types. We've looked at attentional focuses and the 3 processes. Now we're looking at focus and performance. Now we look at what the literature says about focus and performance, and how focus is identified or explained, or experienced rather, when people are firing at their absolute best. So the 3 key points are: people are absorbed in the present when they are performing at their best and their focus is optimum. They're relaxed but focused. They have extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment. They're not overly focused on the fine details, but of their macro body, not the micro body. So relaxed and focused as a second point. Obviously, if someone they prefer a higher arousal state, they'll be on the higher end of that. They still have a form, they're mentally relaxed, but they hit that Goldilocks at a slightly elevated state. But what they say is, as I say, with high performance and focus, they're absorbed in the present, relaxed and focused, and they have extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment. Now, I'm going to take you back to 2015 because I started studying psychology in 2015 in October, but before that, leading up to that point, I was doing a lot of competitions for jiu-jitsu at that time. I was a blue belt. I was, in my mid-30s. And so I like to compare and contrast how I did in certain competitions to kind of give you guys an idea of how my performance was affected by my focus. So I started the year, I think I did 6 or 7 competitions over the course of 2015. Different results. Now I was in Colombia at the beginning of the year, and I had started to kind of use imagery to imagine winning a gold medal, having that gold medal placed over my head, using that image, feeling that gold medal rest on my chest, feeling the the ribbon from the gold medal being placed over my head and like hanging off my neck. Because when you use imagery, we don't used to use visualization, we use all the senses. So also feeling what it would feel like to win a gold medal in this competition. So I'm playing with this idea, doing this every day, and it's having an effect on my motivation. It's having an effect on my focus. I'm training, so I'm in Colombia, and this is where I'm starting over Christmas. I'm like, I really want to compete this year. I want to win a gold medal. I want to experience this. I want to do what I can to do this. And what this did, as I say, ramped up my motivation, my training. I was around 79, 80 kilos at this point. Now, if I competed at that level, that weight class, I'll be one of the smaller people. So what I did was took the decision that I was going to cut my weight down to the 76 kilo weight class, which would require me to get to about 74 kilos because you wear a gi, a kimono, when you do jiu-jitsu, and that weighs about 2 kilos, kilo and a half, you get a lightweight one. So not only did I have to train my jiu-jitsu to a level where I was going to be able to compete, I had to bring my weight down, but also bring my weight down so I could still perform. I had to get my conditioning, my strength. I had to get all these things working together for me to achieve my goal. Now, as I say, if I'm internally focused on what I have to do these things, with my conscious mind, it's going to be very difficult. I've got the cart before the horse, if you like. I am going to have to think about everything, and my conscious mind is slow and it takes a lot of energy. Whereas it's better if I give myself that image and use those other sensory organs as well, touch, listening, hearing, and the emotional response I'll feel when I would win is going to get me put the horse in front of the cart. Because when I go back to that term I mentioned earlier, which I love to say, automaticity, if I really focus on that gold medal and how it will feel on my chest, both internally, emotionally, and externally, the weight on my chest, and I say to myself, I'm going to win that gold medal, I'm going to win that championship or whatever. I repeat that over and over and over and over. My actions will start to be dictated by unconscious thought. I've given myself that thing to focus on. I'm going to start making lots of unconscious decisions to make that happen. And this is what happened. Start to eat a lot healthier. Obviously, I used some conscious decisions to think about what I was going to do with my diet. But this got me in my preparation phase. And then as time went on, April, around that time of year, my first competition came along. Now, in the first one, it was a fairly biggish competition, didn't do so well. But I laid the groundwork, made weight. I think I had to skip outside because I needed to lose 300 grams. So that wasn't ideal. Didn't do so well in that competition, but I learned a lot. I stress tested what I was doing. I remember I started off when I was in a good frame of mind, but then I got put in a kind of a bad position. I was losing. And then I started to think, oh, it's not going so well, what do I do from here? And so on and so forth. So I also wanted to talk about is some of the distractions, the focus problems that they talk about in sports psychology. So we have internal distractions and external distractions. So internal distractions starts with attending to past events. So many years before this, I had done a competition and maybe I didn't do so well. So I've gone into this competition. I'm doing okay. It's all good. And then I get put in a bad position. And then I start thinking about the time I lost before. I'm not focused on what's going on right at the moment. I'm focused on, this is similar to like it was before. I'm not going to win. And then you're thinking about a million different things that you don't need to be thinking about. And this is typical. Remember what I said with people which are performing at their absolute best are absorbed in the present. So when you're there going, oh, I'm losing here, I'm going to lose again. This is what it feels like to lose. You're in a cascade of negative emotion and distraction, and you're not going to be able to perform at your best. And guess what? I lost. On to the next one. So a few weeks later, I go on to my next competition. I forget the order of how it goes now, but either the second or third competition, I had my first win. This took me forward into a bronze match. And this match was the one I won. The first one was a pretty boring match, but you need your first win under your belt, and I got that. I felt like I was absorbed in the present. I did feel kind of relaxed. I felt like my performance was better. I wouldn't say I had extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment, but I knew where I was at all times. I felt pretty comfortable with where I was going, and as a result, I was able to perform well and get myself a bronze medal. And that was great. Wasn't the gold medal, but hey, we're moving in the right direction here. And there was a definite uptick in being more absorbed in the present. I was more relaxed and focused, and I wouldn't say extraordinary awareness, as I say, but I knew where I was at all times, so my focus was getting a bit sharper. Now, attending to future events is one of these other internal distractions. So we'll tick through these as we go. Internal distractions, so previously we talked about attending to past events. Now we're attending to future events. So you get into a competition, you're doing whatever, and it's like, oh, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Oh, I've lost. That's that classic example. Now, when I was researching for the podcast, I came across an anecdote of Pete Sampras. I believe it was the Australian Open. He was up a set, he's on his way. He's looking like he's going to win. I don't believe he had won the Australian at this point. And he starts to think about lifting the trophy, talking to the press after the competition. He started attending to future events. Boom, double fault. Boom, he's got his all-time great serve has just been broken, and all of a sudden he's absolutely losing it. And the person he's playing has come back into it, and all of a sudden he's got a fight on his hand. He come back and won, Sampras, but he was asked after, what happened to your performance in that third set, whatever it was. I started to think about winning. And you hear about this a lot, especially tennis. There's a lot of talk about sports psychology in tennis. It's the structure of the game. It's how it's one-on-one, which I love. A friend of mine, Ramsey's always talking about team sports is whatever. Where it really counts is one-on-one, because it's just you and them, and that's it. I mean, there's some sportsmen in team sports I love and talk about a lot, but one-on-one is where they are where the big boys and girls play, because there's nowhere to hide. There's no team, there's no distractions, there's no one else, it's just you. And I love that. And tennis is great, because once it starts getting away from you in fighting or tennis or any of these one-on-one sports, it's psychologically so demanding. And that's why I like to use that example of Sampras there, because they always talk about, oh, you get when you get ahead of yourself, because they always say you play point by point, and the journalists go, oh, do you really? They're trying to get more out of them. It's like, yeah, the greats do, because that's why Roger Federer, Sampras, Nadal, Djokovic, that's why they've won so many slams, because they're not faffing around thinking about long term. They're thinking about their next point, staying in the moment. They are absorbed in the present because we've got limited attention and we can't be thinking about future or past when we're performing at our best. The next internal distraction, choking. Now, choking comes from an over it's over arousal. It can be you're too distracted by what's going on around you. Now, I mentioned earlier about playing football at school. Now, this I'll never forget. And they say you learn from your mistakes or these sorts of episodes, and it's true. I was playing football in front of the school. It was just our year. It was by form. I remember we were playing in the 5-a-side pitch or whatever, 7-a-side, and I couldn't do anything. Could not do a thing. Couldn't kick a ball in the straight line. Couldn't do a thing. And it's because I was so conscious of the whole school watching. And I just remember I couldn't do a thing. And I was never the best at football. And that probably had something to do with it. But I choked. I couldn't do a thing. And we've all seen professional sports people do the same. Funnily enough, when I was younger, I played American football time after time from the age of 8 to 14. And I never choked once. I don't know why playing football in front of the school, maybe it was to do with that. Too many people, too much. What are they thinking about my performance and what are they going to say? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas American football pitch, I didn't care. I was absorbed in the present. Plus, I was better trained at that. But and there was rarely a large crowd, but I would always kind of perform half decent. I would perform well. When it came to the school, not so much. So when you're overly aroused or you're overly distracted, you're worrying about this, you're worrying about that, you're not absorbed in the present, are you? You're not absorbed in what you're doing. You can't have an extraordinary awareness of your body and external environment. And you're not relaxed and focused. So choking is when all three of those things basically collapse. It's called a catastrophic performance, when the arousal level gets too high, we're thinking about all these other things, and you're just not able to perform. And when you choke, you tend to be thinking about future and past events as well. So it's all kind of wrapped up in there. And also the next one, over analyzing body mechanics. As we mentioned, if I'm thinking about my wrist when I'm shooting free throws, or I'm serving in tennis and I'm thinking about my elbow, whatever it is, if I'm lifting weights and I'm thinking about the way my hand is gripping the barbell, whatever, no good, because it's too fine motor function. Should be thinking about that barbell getting to its final position, or my major muscle groups sort of in the external, like crushing that pineapple, or standing on plates and really driving through the earth, something like that. Over analyzing body mechanics is just making things which should be unconscious conscious. So when we're talking about jiu-jitsu, like I didn't have a choking experience in jiu-jitsu, so maybe I just like lost terribly. just it wasn't so much choking, and just getting dominated, and you've lost. But if you're competing in jiu-jitsu, it's such a full body activity that if you're over analyzing body mechanics, it's too slow, too cumbersome, not going to work out for you. If you're thinking about how do I do that technique again, or in the middle of a competition when your heart's pounding and someone's like trying to choke you, literally, then it's not going to work out for you. And as I say, I was over the course of lockdown, I was shooting free throws quite a lot because everyone's locked down, couldn't go jiu-jitsu, couldn't do as much sport and exercise as I'd like to do. So I started shooting free throws. The minute you start thinking about what your wrist is doing, then you're not thinking about that distal external focus of the ball going in the hole. Think about the ball going in the hole, seeing that happen over time and time and again, and we're going to harness that automaticity, that beautiful word. We're putting the horse before the cart if we do that. If we do the opposite, we're thinking about our body mechanics, we're going to do it the other way. So I've been going back to 2015, I'll be competing, I'll be thinking specifically about specific body mechanics. That's when my performance is going in the toilet. that's when I'm losing. Fatigue is the next internal distraction. Now, once you start feeling fatigued, which I had an experience of, you start thinking you're not so much focused in the present too. You're like, have I got enough energy? And that becomes to be a worry. Then you become anxious, and then you become, again, you start to overanalyze your body mechanics once you have fatigue, because you're like, am I tired? What's going on? Are my legs knackered? What's going on? Because one of these competitions in 2015, I trained in the lead up to this comp in jumping guard. So as you start, you don't try and trip them up or take them down. You jump up and try and pull them down into your guard and try attack submissions straight away. So I spent weeks attacking these submissions in class, thinking, I've got this. This is what I'm going to do. This is my focus going in. And it starts off great. And then I go to jump guard, and then the other guy jumps guard on me. So he pulls me down to the mat. So I have to get out of his guard, basically. He's using his legs and he's using his arms to kind of pull me down. And if we stay here for the 5 minutes of the match, I'm going to lose. So I have to stand up, break the guard, and get out of here. So I stood up. He's strong. Very, very strong. He pulls me down. My legs feel like, when you're playing a computer game and your energy bar's gone halfway. I'm like, my legs. I'm thinking about my fatigued legs. And I'm thinking about how much time. I've got another match after this. Attending to future events. I'm not absorbed in the present. I'm not relaxed and focused. I'm tired. My legs, they're burning. And maybe I've got awareness of my both body and environment. Well, I'm not so much. I'm just thinking about my legs. The external environment, what he's doing specifically, I'm lost on. I'm just thinking my legs are on fire here. And if I stand up again, how much energy have I got left? And I'm all this conscious cascade of anxiety and distraction is rolling through. And it ended up that I couldn't break open the guard. He beat me by an advantage because he didn't really do much. Strong kid. Strong kid. But again, fatigue. Once you start thinking, have I got the energy? This is what they say when you're preparing for a championship fight or whatever. You fatigue. Your conditioning better be immaculate. You don't want to be in a fight, or you don't want to be in a competition and think, oh, my fatigue's not where it should. I'm more fatigued. My energy, my conditioning's not where it needs to be. Final internal distraction is inadequate motivation. So this is like this low arousal state. And, you're stepping on the mat and you're like, I don't want to be here. What am I doing here? Not bothered. So you haven't used imagery to get yourself ramped up. You've just kind of gone there because why not? You're making up the numbers. You're biding your time. And it's when you in this sort of mindset, time is sort of slipping by and you're like, oh, I'll do something in a minute. I'm going to do something in a minute, I'm going to take action in a minute. I'll do something in a minute. And no. Time runs out and it's like, what could have been? I watch a lot of fights in MMA and I watch different sports, and you can see this in people. They've trained 6 to 8 weeks for this fight. They've had to cut weight. They've done all this preparation. They're in their last round. They're losing, and they're biding their time. They're waiting to go, but they just don't pull the trigger. And it's tricky, It's don't envy them, It's a hard job, tough work, but they're not absorbed in the present. Going back to these 3 elements within focus and performance, they're not relaxed and focused. Their focus is everywhere, but not where it needs to be. They don't have that extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment. They're waiting for something to happen, and the other guy's winning. Now, in the lead up to these comps, there was a few times when my motivation was slipping. I remember coming in from work one day and I was just tired. Physically was just not up for it. And I was training that day and I had hill sprints. And hill sprints is something when you're not feeling that motivated, it's hard to get up for. But I've been doing a lot more my imagery, my self-talk, and it was a really interesting story for me because I got home and consciously I was like, I'm not going to do my hill sprints today. I was telling myself, no hill sprints today. I am tired. I'm going to rest and recuperate. And as I was saying all this, I got changed, got my stuff together, got my water, and I walked out of the flat and I started walking to the hill to do my hill sprints. And I found it interesting because that automaticity, that word I keep using, these unconscious decisions I was making took me in direction to do my hill sprints. Whilst consciously there was a conflict. I was like, no, tired, and I'm tired, and I've got fatigue, and I'm not going to go and do it today, and blah blah blah. But the amount of imagery I'd done and the self-talk and the so on had an effect where my unconscious mind overrode my conscious thought. So I'm giving all the reasons, I'm articulating to myself exactly why I'm not going to do my hill sprints today, but because I had done all that work, focusing in my mind on achieving my goal of winning a gold medal that year, it overrode it, which I think is fascinating. So your conscious mind can be overrun if you give yourself the right focus and motivation. So it's about getting the horse before the cart, because you can't think about everything you need to do. Just think about the outcome. Think about that golf ball going in the hole, not what you have to do for it to happen, because you can't control those things. Now, we've talked about internal distractions, so just to recap, that's attending to past events, attending to future events, choking, over analyzing body mechanics, fatigue, and inadequate motivation. External distractions are both visual distractions, thinking about in basketball when someone has to shoot free throws and the home crowd are like shaking distraction things. And the great shooters, they don't even see it. They don't even see the distractions. And there's auditory distractions. I remember Tiger Woods' dad, the story goes that when he was a kid, he would shout when Tiger would be in his backswing. So he takes his club back to hit the ball and he'd shout at that kind of worst time for a golfer. To get him used to being distracted. Because years later, whenever Tiger Woods would be playing golf, every time he hits a ball, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people walking with him. So he has to get used to that. So you can be visually distracted, or you can be distracted by auditory means. Now, as I say, Tiger Woods' dad trained him for that. Basketball players will focus. They're just focused in. You got all this chaotic imagery in front of them, and they just see the basket. And they will practice that. Larry Bird, your best shooters, Steph Curry, all those guys, they would just ignore all that and focus on what they need to focus on. That's selective attention. Now imagine a boxer going into a world championship fight. Joe Louis fought Max Schmeling during the Second World War, German versus an American. Biggest fight ever. You're going into the crowd, however many, 100,000 people. Imagine the distraction that could be there, the visual, the auditory distraction. Joe Louis was ice cold that night. Nothing mattered but Max Schmeling. And he took him apart quickly. All of those distractions, he just left them. He focused on what he needed to do. And again, we'll recap those three elements that they brought up from the literature of sports psychology. Being absorbed in the present, nothing else matters. They're relaxed and focused. And they have extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment. And you can see it when it's happening. It's always worth for me watching people perform at their best, seeing what they were doing and listening to what they have to say about it after. Were they relaxed? What were they thinking about? How did they prepare? Because, as I say, we live in a modern world where it's incredibly distracting. If we can learn from these great champions and become more focused in what we do, who knows? Because as I keep saying, if we put the horse in front of the cart, who knows what we can achieve? So, going back to my 2015 competition stories. So I had 6 or 7 comps, a few of them not so good. Then I got my bronze, building up my motivation. I went on holiday to Malta, which was a bit of a distraction, loved it, but had to keep my weight low still. I had to keep that imagery going, so making sure that the motivation and the energy kept going. Because you don't want something like that to stop and have to start again. Momentum is huge. So My wife travelled back to Colombia, I believe it was. I was going to stay on and I was going to go down to Brighton to compete. So I had a long travel, wasn't eating as much as I would like to because I had to maintain my weight. Got lost looking for the place. Finally found my the location, got in there. As I said, in leading up to this, I had 4 or 5 comps at this point. I had done my preparation. I was getting used to it, so I was able to put more focus on my work. I was used to competing now, so I was getting over that kind of nerves beforehand. Went into my competition, won my first match by submission. Brilliant. Then I went into the final match. Final match started. Oh yeah, and it's I think it's 5 or 6 minutes long. So for the first 4 minutes, we'll say, I was just getting dominated. I got tripped, got my guard passed, reclaimed my guard. There's a scoring system in jiu-jitsu, and I was 7 points down with about a minute and a half to go. I was losing badly. Now, interestingly, previous competitions, when I was losing, you start to think, oh, time's running out, I need to do something, oh, I'm going to lose and stuff. I wasn't focused, absorbed in the present, as they say. Whereas I've got the video for this competition particularly, and I was losing, and I remember I swept the guy over, which gave me 2 points. I'm 7-2 down. I look up at the scoreboard, and I see then that I'm 7-2 down. I wasn't even aware. So I didn't have extraordinary awareness. But I think that came down to me being relaxed and focused and absorbed in the present. I looked up at the scoreboard. I'm 7-2 down. I look down. I look up again. 7-2 down. When did that happen? All right. Now, what happened next was quite remarkable because for me, I ended up, just to cut a long story short, I ended up winning this competition, winning my gold medal, just like I imagined, prepared for. I ended up winning from this position. But I didn't really think about much when I was doing it. I ended up winning by submission, which I'd never practiced. Now I think that's quite interesting. I did something under pressure, which I'd never practiced before, against a resisting opponent when I was losing. So for me, that goes back to that automaticity. That goes back to that preparation. The preparation hadn't have been there was no way I would have been able to do what I did because I wasn't so aware of the scoring. I wasn't so focused on some elements, but I must have been focused on me and my opponent and my relation to them. Because for me to finish this arm lock submission, well, I've never practiced while under pressure, shows that I must have had an extraordinary awareness, must have been relaxed and focused because I wasn't thinking about anything else and I was absorbed in the present. Now, if I hadn't done this preparation, there is no way I would have achieved this. And this is always a story that I think to myself, this is the power of imagery. This is the power of focus, preparation. Because as I say, if I'm thinking about what I'm doing in that situation and what I'm trying to do, it just wouldn't have worked. Wouldn't have happened. I would have just struggled and lost. Again, it goes back to that cart before the horse. My focus was on what I wanted to achieve, macro, external from me, broad. I wanted that gold medal, and basically I had reinforced that over time, and so my body kind of let it go, and look what it achieved. And you hear elite sportsmen, elite performers, like a musician, they can't think about if I'm a masterful guitar player or whatever, I can't think about every little thing I do with my fingers to play that guitar. My performance is just going to nosedive if I do that. It's just not going to happen, is it? So, that little story to me really shows the power of attention and preparation, focus, and what we can do. And again, this is the opposite of what the world is kind of pushing us towards. Look around. Everyone else, 80% of people are completely distracted. They are doing the opposite. Well, it's up to us. If you want to achieve your goals, to be more focused on what it is you want and really see it, really feel it. Write it down. Look at it often, because, I mean, how many times a day does an average person look at their phone? How many times a day does the average person look at the goals they're trying to achieve? I mean, it's just a simple maths equation. If you're looking at nonsense day in and day out, not looking what you're trying to achieve, then push comes to shove, what's going to be sacrificed and what are you going to do? So focus and attention. There's many ways we can improve our focus and attention. We can use self-talk to enhance concentration. We can practice stopping our thoughts, because our minds can go a million miles an hour sometimes and not very useful a lot of the time. Changing negative self-talk to positive self-talk. That's one I share with my clients all the time. Never call yourself weak, tired. I hope to do this. No. Never talk about yourself in a negative sense. You can say, I could have done that better, but never negative. Never call yourself weak, tired, this, that, and the other, because if that becomes a habit, then that becomes your reality. Positive self-talk, not give yourself encouragement. If you don't have any encouraging voices in your life, then you're going to have to be the one to provide that. You have to use simulation in practice. Use cue words to trigger the responses you want. Not too many. You can only attend to a certain amount of things. Don't be too judgmental to yourself. Give value-free analysis and establish a routine. You give yourself, a plan. Plan things out, because if things don't go quite to plan, but you've got a good solid plan there with contingency, you can adapt and you can still be effective. A client of mine was preparing for a grading, and he very much sets himself a plan every time he grades. And before he graded, literally 5-10 minutes before, he slipped and he injured himself. Now, ordinarily, that might have been catastrophic. It might have been grading over, can't do it. But the fact was, he had planned out his grading so intently, he quickly adjusted. In the lead up to that, we were talking a lot about GB rowing team for one of the Olympics. They prepared so much and had contingency for everything. They had a spare boat brought in just in case there was an issue with their original boat, so that all things were thought about. And this is like a process that you can keep improving. So you go to one competition, you have a contingency, and something happens you hadn't planned for. Well, that goes into the contingency for the next one. You bring in that spare boat, whatever it is you need. So that's a kind of long, broad talk about attention. The final thing I wanted to talk about today was an example. Recently, me and a friend like to watch fights each week, and I couldn't help with this podcast coming up to note the difference in attention of two boxers. Now, the first fight, which I reference, is Bernard Hopkins versus Felix Trinidad. And throughout that fight, Bernard Hopkins was incredibly focused. His mental preparation and conditioning really separates him. He's always in the right place. He knows his awareness of the ring, going back to that high performance, is very much clear when you watch him. But there's a particular time in that fight when over the course of the fight, his protective cup and hip protection had rode up over his shorts, and the referee was trying to adjust him. He was trying to adjust another grown man's shorts in the middle of the fight. And the funny thing for me was, the referee is there adjusting him, and Hopkins is not even aware of the referee. He's looking at his opponent, who is Felix Trinidad. He doesn't even blink. If you want to watch this fight, it's in the playlist Fight of the Week. Bernard Hopkins versus Trinidad, Felix Trinidad. And I've written a blog about this, and I mentioned this in the blog. So there he is. He's got another man adjusting his shorts, trying to pull the shorts over the cup and as a protection. Because it's getting a bit untidy, we'll just say. And he's not even paying attention to the guy, the referee. He's looking straight at Trinidad. No blinking, no nothing. There's a term called quiet eye, and it's defined as the final fixation or tracking gaze that is located on a specific location or object in the visio-motor workspace. Now, when someone's eyes they're not moving around, they have this quiet eye, they are focused because the eye is, the window to the soul. When someone's not looking around anywhere, they're focused on a point. That shows you that person's focused. Well, Hopkins was focused. A few weeks later, we watched Pernell Whitaker fight the same opponent, Felix Trinidad. Whitaker is great fighter, incredible boxer, super slick. But in his movements, he lost his balance in this fight. And he goes down. Referee waves it off. No knockdown, Pernell. Don't worry. Pernell Whitaker gets up. He looks at his corner, says something to his corner, looks at the crowd, looks kind of sheepish, and his eyes flickering all over the place. He's not got that quiet eye going on at all. Now, interestingly, Hopkins won that fight comfortably. He actually won by stoppage in the end in the last round, I believe, the 12th. Whitaker lost. Now, obviously, a lot goes into a fight like that. Title fight. But the difference in focus was huge, and it's obvious to me those two situations were chalk and cheese. Absolutely different. Whitaker wasn't in a high performance state. He wasn't in the moment. He was embarrassed when he fell over. Bernard Hopkins was not embarrassed that his protection was riding up over his shorts. He didn't care. The crowd were irrelevant. Whitaker's looking at the crowd. For Hopkins, they're irrelevant. As I say, now to just reiterate, focus and performance. These are the three principles. Absorbed in the present. Hopkins was absorbed in the present 100%. Pernell Whitaker's worried about what's going to be said. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen after? Relaxed and focused. I remember at the end of the Hopkins fight, he's barely breathing heavy against Trinidad. He's just looking around the ring. His chest isn't heaving or anything. He was quite an old man at that point. I say old man. He was in his late 30s. Extraordinary awareness of both body and external environment. He knew every corner of that ring. Whereas Pernell Whitaker, he slipped over a number of times. He kind of lost his balance. He wasn't relaxed and focused. He was anything but. I'm going to leave you guys with a quote. We're coming to the end here. It's the longest podcast so far. So coming up to an hour and a half. So, focus. So important. The world is chaos itself. Endless distraction. We can't attend to these things. Now, here is a quote from a Dr. DeCamp and Jackson 2007 study. And I really like this, and I was going to leave you with this. It is difficult to conceive of any aspect of human skill that is not, in some way, either dependent or influenced by attention, another word for focus. Equally, it is difficult to conceive of any aspect of psychology that may be more central to the enhancement of skill learning and expert performance than attention, another word for focus. So, this is why this is the #1 podcast for performance, because of focus and attention, as DeCamp and Jackson have just said, it is absolutely critical. It's difficult to conceive of any aspect of psychology that may be more central to the enhancement of skill learning and expert performance. So if you're interested in learning new skills and performing at your absolute best, focused attention. This is where it's at, because without this focus, you're not going to perform at your best because you're going to be distracted. And as I say, you're going to be that impulsive monkey jumping from thing to thing, rather than that horse chomping on that grass, tethered to a tree, ready to put all your attention, physical energy, and psychological focus on the task at hand. There's only so many things we can attend to, and in a world of endless distraction, you may be very careful on what you do focus on. So thank you very much. This is episode 4 of the Druid High Performance Podcast. The value of focused attention in a sea of distraction. Please like and subscribe. To ask questions, email info@druidhighperformance.com, and to enroll on the 15-day longevity program, please email ahead. If you would like help to focus your attention on what you want to focus your attention on, ignore the distractions, perform at your best. If you want to focus your mind and empower your body, focus on health and longevity, get in touch. That's what we offer at Druid High Performance. Self-development for the modern world. Just what are you capable of?